The Maid of Might returns to the big screen in her own film for the first time in over 40 years. Does she soar or sink? Find out when Johnny Torch reviews Supergirl. Welcome into another Johnny Torch Reviews. Today we're going to be tackling the somewhat controversial Supergirl, the Maid of Might, in her first starring role in a feature film since 1984 when Helen Slater first took the role. And that film didn't really go off so well, but Supergirl returned several times since, more recently on television with Melissa Benoist, doing a very good job in the role. And as usual, we start the review with a little bit of history. I'm not going to delve too deeply in that because I gave my thoughts on the media's incarnation of Supergirl in a rant video titled Supergirl Innocence Lost. So check that out. I'll try to put a card in to make it easier for you to find. But we went over that in a rant video that was pretty successful. And of course, the lead up to this film was another one of those dog and pony shows where a lot of heat was taken. Millie Alcock, the titular heroine of the film, as is wont to happen from the usual suspects, took a lot of heat. There was a lot of controversy. She fired back, some would say unwisely feeding the fire. And I also broached that subject in some of my live streams. So you can check out some of our more recent live streams for any more of my take on that. That was pretty ridiculous. But we're going to try to focus more squarely on the film today and just shut out all the noise and just focus on what we actually got in the movie. Now, for starters, again, before we get into spoilers or anything, I'll just try to give my just basic thoughts on the film, whether, you should see it, not see it, or what have you. We begin with the premise that I do not like this iteration of Supergirl that they are peddling. I do not like the fact that she is, drunk and rude and belligerent and sort of a PTSD survivor. That to me is not Supergirl. I think that's sort of a new incarnation of the character, a new sort of adaptation of the role of the character's role in the DCU. So I started off, on the wrong foot with this version to begin with. So going in, I knew I wasn't particularly going to be fond of this incarnation, but of course there is always the possibility that you could win me over. Giving Supergirl a character arc is not a terrible thing to do. Certain movies also, I might not have liked what they did with them, but they still won me over. I mean, for instance, The Flash. I'm not a big fan of Ezra Miller and his take on The Flash, but I thought that was a successful movie in the sense that it still worked as a movie. And there are other examples I could use, such as Spider-Man 3. I really didn't like Sandman being the killer of Uncle Ben, but it worked in context of the movie. She-Surfer and Fantastic Four First Steps, not a concept that I would have liked. I would have liked the original male surfer, but within the context of the film, it made sense. So, I mean, you can win me over if it is a decent script and a well thought out story. Unfortunately, in this case, it didn't seem to win me over. I didn't really care for the way this movie was approached in any respect. Honestly, I described it as being the most drab and somber film that I think I've witnessed in theaters for a long time. There is literally no joy in the picture. And for me, for a character like Supergirl, that is a big mistake. To begin with, we go to these movies so that we can see the color, the spectacle, the excitement. And this is something that I felt that James Gunn brought back with Superman last year. And it wasn't completely well received because we had a lot of Snyder Bros and, another segment of the fandom that pretty much is never satisfied. We're not satisfied with Superman. They found something to complain about. But on the whole, I felt that Gunn's version of Superman was more or less the best version of Superman we've had since probably Christopher Reeve. Certainly in the last 25 years, since say 2000. And we brought hope back to Superman. We got a very likable Superman in David Cornsweet, and it felt like the Superman universe was in good hands. Now they left the movie with the implication that the follow-up would be Supergirl by introducing Supergirl at the end of the film, and we saw that she was sort of a drunk and bratty party girl. Again, I didn't like that incarnation, but with a good story, you could possibly win me over with a successful character arc. And I contend that there really wasn't a good one here. I mean, I could see what they were going for. And it's possible that there was a better iteration of this script. There's been a lot of talk that behind the scenes things were, there were different cuts of the film, there were different edits made. James Gunn came in to try to sort of 11th hour cut the film to something a little more palatable. Test audiences weren't very receptive. And I think the director's original vision was, put on the shelf, so to speak, in favor of the studio and Gunn tinkering a little bit to try to save the picture. They didn't save the picture, to cut to the chase. I'm going to get into the spoilers now, but again, so for just broad strokes, this to me felt like Supergirl's version of Man of Steel. Now, I make no bones about the fact that I did not like the Snyderverse. I did not like Snyder's iteration of Superman, or pretty much any of his take on the Justice League characters. Morose, somber. Some people, for some reason, seem to dig that, but I don't like that with Superman. He's supposed to be a beacon of hope. And Supergirl is supposed to represent that hope as well. She bears the crest of Superman, even if in this case it might not represent Krypton. I think they're going with the Silver Age version where Ma Kent pretty much put together the costume. But it still represents hope, and it represents a symbol of goodness, general optimism. We don't see any of that here really with Supergirl. And by the time she is sort of pleasantly faced, as we see in this image here, and she's kind of shaken off the old her, it feels completely unearned. And again, there are some performances here, sort of like with Man of Steel. There are some good actors. The girl that played Ruthie, some people have described her as being annoying. I thought she was very good. I mean, for what the script called for her to do. She's a cute innocent that Supergirl was trying to protect. That was fine. The villain is really nothing to write home about. Probably not the most forgettable villain in all the pantheon of comic book films I've seen, but again, basically just a cardboard stand-in for our villain. Jason Momoa's Lobo is really the only one who sort of lights a fire in the film and sort of sparks some excitement, some enthusiasm. Millie Alcock, for her part, I feel like she was fine. She was good, I guess. I don't really think, after all the hullabaloo, I mean, she doesn't really transcend the material, but with better material, I think hopefully material she'll get in Man of Tomorrow because she's going to be in that film. I feel like she does have the capability of making an endearing Kara. And we did see some glimpses of it, and we'll get into the details in a few moments. But just general overview, it's not the worst. I wouldn't say it's even among the worst films I've ever seen, but it is very disappointing. Um, so again, I guess before I get into the spoilers, I would give this film maybe a 2 out of 5 stars. 2 out of 5 stars is basically below average. I'm probably not going to watch this one very often, but I would maybe get it, on a hard copy just to have in my collection, just on the off chance that maybe I will someday. Sort of like, I mean, to give you an idea what a two is, it's sort of like Batman Returns, Superman Returns, Man of Steel, which again, Man of Steel, I felt very closely associated with this film. This is Supergirl's Man of Steel, and we'll get into the spoilers now, so you've been warned. But I have a feeling, since this is probably one of the latest reviews, I was almost not sure I was going to see this film because I had been mostly spoiled with what was going to happen, and I was like, I, contrary to what a lot of people like to do, I don't like to hate watch a movie. If I hear something is not going to be to my um, specifications, that it's going to have things that I know are going to aggravate me, I don't subject myself to that very often. But I kind of felt that there was so much hubbub about this that I kind of wanted to see for myself what the actual situation was. And the best way to do that was to do it on the big screen and not wait until it was out on DVD or digital or whatever in the next couple of months. So again, spoiler warning, but we'll try to break down the film a little bit at a time. The bad, the not so good, and there is a couple of glimmers of good things that I kind of liked that we'll get to in due course. First of all, the comparison to Man of Steel, I described it as, when I sat in the theater to watch Man of Steel, I felt like it was a film that went down the wrong direction every way possible. And I kept, metaphorically smacking my forehead saying, why did they do that? It makes no sense, and it should have been done a better way. There must have been a better way to get the point across. Um, in Man of Steel, I'm watching it. Jor-El is killed before Kal-El is even rocketed off Krypton. Why? That was a stupid decision. General Zod is sent to the Phantom Zone with his minions literally seconds before the planet explodes. Why? Everybody's going to die. You basically just saved him. Then the movie goes on and continues, and we have Pa Kent die in a hurricane or tornado, and Clark doesn't save him. He probably could have saved him without anybody seeing, but he doesn't. Why? Clark smashes a belligerent trucker's rig on a telephone, and he threw a beer at him or whatever. Why? The guy probably had no idea. I mean, that's not really punishment. The guy probably has no idea what happened. And there's like a better way to do these kind of things. And then we finally get to the end. We're building to the end, and Superman is fighting Zod. Zod is going to kill people. There's no way possible for Superman to prevent Zod from killing people. He's just using Metropolis as his playground to just destroy everything. He finally corners a bunch of people, an innocent family, and I keep saying to myself, don't go there. Don't go there. And Superman breaks his neck. And the same kind of routine it felt like I was going through during Supergirl. A lot of things are happening. I'm saying, why? Why are they doing this? Why are you going down this path? Try to do something else. And like I said, it's a very joyless and somber movie, culminating in Supergirl killing the villain. Now, of all heroes and heroines, Superman should not be killing the villain. Supergirl should not be killing the villain. Who asked for a Supergirl movie where Supergirl acts like Logan more than Superman? Now, of course, I guess comparing this to Man of Steel, you can say she acted like Superman, but that is not the course that you want to take when you've got a Supergirl script. I would have just vetoed this right away. There would have been a much better Supergirl movie had they gone back to the comics and tried to cull some stories that actually depicted Kara as being heroic. Instead, they're constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. They went back to a miniseries or a graphic novel, and full disclosure, I haven't read the novel. I've heard some about it since then, and I figured, well, why read it now, seeing as how I wanted to come into the movie with a fresh slate and not try to compare it to the movie to the book. A lot of people are upset with that it did change many things from the book. The story by Tom King, who, again, I don't think I've read anything from Tom King. I just know him as a lot of people don't like him, particularly on his run from Batman. But I have not read any of his stuff. I honestly haven't read any comics in the woke era for the past 10 years. So, I mean, I'm probably not alone there. But I feel better material could have been culled somewhere along the line in Supergirl's history. Whether Tom King's story was better than this, again, I don't know. But it couldn't have been worse than this, because this is not the kind of story you want to tell. Um, like I said, this would have been a story. You have basically the protagonist being drunk and rude and disorderly. Then you introduce a family that betrays her, that ends up getting killed because of her. You have child trafficking in a Supergirl movie, and then you have the heroine, preaching to the little girl that vengeance is not the way. It's going to change you. It's going to scar you for life. You can't take vengeance into your own hands. You can't stain your hands with blood. And then she goes and kills the villain herself. Again, this does not make any sense. I mean, if we take that final part there, it's basically the exact same thing as Batman Forever, which, again, Batman Forever is one of my favorite movies. It's actually my favorite of the 90s Batman films. Well, 80s, 90s, Batman 89 is technically 89. But that's my favorite Batman film of that era. But it is laughably bad that Bruce preaches to Dick through the whole movie how killing Two-Face isn't right, and you can't make up for your parents' death by killing him. You're only going to have blood on your hands, and I've gone down this path before, which, at least as stupid as it was in the Batman films, he's killed, so he knows what he's talking about. In Kara's case, I don't think she's killed anybody before this. We don't really know. But then he ends up tossing a handful of $50 at Two-Face, and he just plummets to his death like an ignoramus. And basically a weak ending to that storyline. But, the problem is that a lot of you build into your film something like that, and it needs to pay off. Now Two-Face needed to pay for the Grayson's death. And in the same way here, Krem of the Yellow Hills had to pay for Ruthie's parents' death and brother. And the problem is, you can't have Kara be lecturing her all that time and still have her be the one to kill him. Now, they did have an out with Lobo, and they actually have Lobo say something like where he was going to try to kill Krem, and Kara prevents him. I think less so for Krem's sake, more that she wanted the antidote, which is another thing. Crypto is poisoned, and again, that's sort of, it's a very dark and somber feeling film. There's not a lot of laughs. There's not a lot of levity. There's nothing to leaven this. And so when Krem comes on the scene, again, he's a very dark character himself. I know a lot of people have described it as sort of being like a Mad Max villain, and that's true. Too heavy a villain for a Supergirl film. I mean, this guy has got to get his just desserts. This is not a guy that you're going to just put in jail at the end of the movie. This is a guy who is brutal, who kills pretty wantonly. I mean, he's uh, pretty much an unstoppable force, killing people, and of course, enslaving young girls and stuff like that. And so, the nature of the film dictates that he's going to die. Well, again, of course, you have Lobo that can do this, and you also could have made a mini character arc for Lobo, because Lobo, of course, if you're not familiar with him, he's a bounty hunter, and he even says in the film, such such as it is, that he only does what he does for money. He's not a vengeance seeker. He doesn't get revenge. He just uh, basically kills and does what he does for money. And you could have sort of the mini arc that, since his hands are already dirty, he doesn't, have a problem with, for once in his life, taking vengeance just because it's, something that is within his power to do, and not have Ruthie have the blood on her hands. But of course, they don't go that far, because why? Because Supergirl's name is in the title, and so it has to be her kill. But again, this is not the kind of vehicle for a character like Supergirl. I mean, honestly, if you're going to make a Supergirl movie, the best way to do it would be to have her, because the problem is, we'll put aside the origin for a minute. I want to get to the origin, the Krypton, which wasn't too bad. That's kind of the part that I liked. But the thing about a Supergirl is, they are kind of deathly afraid of her being Superman in a skirt. That's why we get this whole reversal where Superman is hopeful and optimistic. He's cheery and he's cheerful. Kara is supposed to be hopeful, optimistic, cheery, and cheerful as well. But we have to make her the opposite of Clark, because if we're going to have Superman behave that way, we can't have both Kryptonians acting the same way. The way to do a Supergirl movie is to do, and I thought that we were going to get hints of this, where she's trying to live up to his example. We see in the beginning, the very beginning, which I'm sure everybody's seen Crypto peeing on the newspaper, but we've seen the newspaper where Superman saves Metropolis or whatever from a nuclear reactor. Supergirl saves a cat from a tree. And if you're going to do Supergirl as her own movie, the idea probably would be best to be, she wants to live up to Superman's ideal, but nobody really is excited to see Supergirl come to save the day. She's more there for the minor annoyances in the city. She doesn't take on, the most dangerous criminals. She's sort of living in Superman's shadow. And what you could have done is that finally she's on her own for some kind of adventure. Maybe it's even to save Superman if you want to try to involve him. But whatever the case, she's got to deal with something on her own, and it's her first time, and she has to try to figure out how Superman navigates this kind of thing, and how she's going to have to do it, because a lot of responsibility is on her shoulders that she never dealt with before. How do I do all these things? How do I have the people look up to me and expect and me to live up to their expectations that I'm going to be able to save them? These are the kind of things that would have been interesting and more in keeping with Supergirl, instead of that she's a belligerent drunk. And again, one of the things that we'll take it a little more sequentially before I get to the Krypton stuff. But we see, as I said, very distasteful and unpleasant type setup with Ruthie's parents being killed. Then we have her in like a bar, a space bar, and getting drunk constantly, and she's sort of disrespecting Superman. Now, this is another thing where a lot of people were upset about during the end of Superman, and it was kind of played more for a joke, like, okay, she's drunk, she's not really. But we see her basically, even when she's not drunk, basically she's very disrespectful to Soup, and he's nothing but kind to her and trying to get her back, as a normal person, and try to get her to integrate with society and do something. And again, she's very disrespectful to him, and that doesn't really, play well with your protagonist. And so she kind of tries to uh, dissuade Ruthie, and again, Crypto gets shot. Playing on the sentimentality of Crypto, which again, I guess that's fine as sort of our inciting incident. And then we have what I call the Guardians of the Galaxy scene, where they get these female pirates that look like they're straight from like a Guardians movie. And I honestly thought this was like the action scenes were not that bad. I thought this was sort of like the best action scene of them. And we have the sort of transportation tech zooming in and out and so on and so forth. You know, and there was a couple of minor laughs with sort of the Babu Frick guy that was driving the bus or whatever. But from this point on, like shortly after this, I tried to play sort of like a game in my mind, and I said to myself, if you didn't walk into this film knowing it was called Supergirl and didn't see, you know, the beginning with the hints that Superman is talking to her and Crypto is her dog and so on and so forth, would you think in your wildest dreams that this is a Supergirl movie? And I swear there's a stretch for about 10 or 15 minutes where I couldn't possibly say yes. I mean, this is just basically, you know, angry girl, blonde, you know, hard drinker, hard partier, going off into a Guardians of the Galaxy style adventure. From like about that point for like the next 10 minutes where she like breaks a guy's arm in a bar and stuff, it just does not feel like Supergirl. And for a stretch of any amount of time, I mean, I'm saying 10, 15 minutes, it was possibly even longer. For the character to not feel like the character that you went in there expecting to see and to have them portray, that's not good. And that's why I think this film is not succeeding, because it doesn't feel like what it's purported to be. This does not feel like Supergirl any way, shape, or form. And she doesn't wear the costume. And at the very end, she wears the costume. But like I said, it doesn't really feel earned, because we see the flashbacks and we get some of the internal monologue sort of in her mind that she's got to sort of overcome this. I'm not really going to go crazy over the plot holes and craziness, but obviously, you know, there's the family there that tries to take her in and help her to find the bad guys. Of course, she gets duped, and you know, it's basically her negligence, I guess, so to speak, is what causes that family to die. And again, a lot of people are going to come down on, well, she shouldn't have stopped Ruthie. I don't know so much that she shouldn't have stopped Ruthie, but she should have stopped Krem. It seems like there was a lot of opportunities for her at least to get the thing around his neck. If she's purportedly got the speed still of a Kryptonian, you would think it would have been somewhat easier for her than it was. Of course, you have a lot of problems as well with, you know, her power levels coming and going due to different things. Another thing is the green sun, which apparently acts as kryptonite, which I don't really understand the logic of that. Kryptonite not really being a star or something like that could emanate the kind of thing. I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to nitpick it. But again, it seems like there was a lot of back and forth trying to get her powers to conveniently come and go. And I guess the plan was from Krem and his band to try to get her on the kryptonite planet, or the planet with the kryptonite sun, and that would cause her to expire before the yellow sun came up. And of course, fortunately, she pulls through and she's there at the end, and she wears the Supergirl colors. And honestly, like I said, it doesn't feel earned, because she doesn't make any kind of affirmation that this is who she is now. At the end of the movie, she kind of pays lip service to that effect with Clark, with Superman. It doesn't feel like it's earned. It doesn't feel like she's learned anything and that she wants to deliberately make a change. And then, you know, to follow that up, she still ends up killing the villain, which again, that does not really show her making a change and being altruistic and being heroic. That's why I said the ending still falls flat. So again, to get into some of these other areas, first let me just briefly go over Jason Momoa as Lobo. Again, this was the role he was born to play. He does a great job. Some people are saying that he's sort of tacked into the movie, like it wasn't really there really wasn't a place for him, and they didn't really intend for him to be in there, but they sort of tacked him in. I didn't really feel that way, and maybe because he was some of the few his was some of the few bright points of the movie. I mean, I honestly don't have the biggest experience with Lobo. I seen him in the animated Superman series. I seen him in Krypton TV show, and I think I might have had a couple of comics that had him in it. So he's not one of my favorite characters, but he is a large enough presence to really, command attention and give you a little bit of spark in what was an otherwise dismal affair. And I didn't really have a problem with him. I mean, he played Lobo basically as I think Lobo was always played. Going back to Superman, David Cornsweet gets two or three scenes. I'm not sure if I remember. Most of them were leaked online long before, or if not leaked, I mean released, because I think they really wanted to try to sell that Superman was in this for people to actually go see the film. And every time that he's on the screen, it's like a breath of fresh air because I missed this guy so much from Superman the movie. I mean, last year's Superman movie. I mean, the guy just embodies Superman so well, David Cornsweet, that you can't help but have a big grin on your face. Uh, he just feels like Superman. And again, that's the night and day difference of this. This film does not feel like it's portraying Supergirl. David Cornsweet feels like he's portraying Superman. The Krypton, well, slash Argo scenes, uh, I liked it for the most part that we got some of her origin here and we seen what was basically the tragedy. Now, this is something that I'm going to go back to that I was saying earlier. If you want to differentiate Superman from Supergirl, and you don't want to say Supergirl is Superman in a skirt and basically has the same background and ideals as him and so forth, you could have done the traditional Supergirl origin here. You could have, in the original storyline, Argo City survives and they just send Supergirl off and they tell her to meet Superman. Now they changed that in the comics recently. I don't remember how many years ago, where she was actually older than Kal-El when he was a baby and sent off, and she was intended to find him and take care of him. I was never crazy about that, but honestly, I would have been okay if that was the biggest change they made. And they don't go with that here. They go with that, I think, roughly 10 years or something after Krypton sent off Kal-El, that she gets sent off, and so that she's, there's an age difference between them. But again, if you wanted to make a difference between them, don't give her PTSD. Don't have her whole civilization be destroyed, because she was originally sent here, and that's why she was a well-adjusted figure, because she didn't have to go through her whole population dying and this and that. And what happens in the movie is that Argo City survives because of the, scientific genius of Zor-El, the brother of Jor-El, and he manages to put a force field around the city of Argo, which propels them out of Krypton when Krypton blows up. And the little, fledgling city there survives up until the orbit comes around after whatever it is, a dozen years or so, to a yellow sun. And of course, the yellow sun is going to turn Krypton into kryptonite. And so the whole city becomes kryptonite, and her mother dies, and her father is dying, and the whole population is going to die. And again, this is a heaviness that you really didn't need to put on Supergirl, because I don't think they even used that in the Musa Benoist show. I think they actually had her mother survive, something like that. One of the things I didn't like is they doubled down again on they have like Superman's pod going by, and I think Alora says, "Oh, that's Jor-El's son, the future conqueror of Earth," or something. And again, that was the worst thing about the Superman movie. James Gunn will not let that go. That they are determined to make Jor-El some kind of weird megalomaniac. I mean, I can understand if you don't want to do the typical thing that most adaptions do, which is, you know, I'm going to send my son into the world and he is going to be a shining example for them to follow and they will, look up to him and he'll lead them and they'll, be what they were always intended to be, reaching their potential. All right. So you don't want to do that. The original storyline was always just, I got to get my son off this planet or he's going to die. And I know he'll survive on Earth because it'll give him strength, it'll give him invulnerability, and he'll survive. You don't need to make him, a pioneer of Earth and he's going to lead people into a golden age. Just say, I want to get him off this planet before it blows up because he's going to blow up with us. And if I can do anything to save his life, I'll put him in this little small shuttle, this small rocket or whatever, and get him off the planet. That's all you needed to do. But again, James Gunn, the only thing that I think that he is going to stick to his guns to the bitter end is that it's not going to be retconned. It's not going to be, as long as he's in charge, mind you. I think we can debate and speculate how long he's going to be in the driver's seat. I think he's going to be there safely for a good dozen years or so. They're not going to just drop him, but that is the only place where I seriously disagree with where he's been taking the Superman storyline. I wasn't crazy about the Kryptonese, to be honest with you. I know that, it's a thing in the comics too. Kryptonians speak Kryptonese. It's not like this was just something but I mean, for the sake of viewers, I felt like, do that thing where they say the first few lines in Kryptonese and then they just talk normal. And then you get the idea, all right, they're speaking their own native language. We didn't need to have subtitles over the whole thing. Sort of took me out of it because we really don't have Kryptonese with any other incarnation of Superman. When we see Krypton, we just get the idea that they must be speaking their own language. But I don't know. I didn't really go for that, and I think that also made it difficult when we see Kara landing on Earth, and then Superman doesn't know how to speak Kryptonese. That was probably a mistake. I think Sup probably would have learned how to speak Kryptonese at that point. But of course, when we seen the last movie, he didn't. So of course, they couldn't, go back on that. It would have been a continuity error. So I guess that is what it is. But I mean, to have him sort of trying to explain to Kara the situation, her not being able to understand a word he's saying, it did feel like, it was just the likability of David Cornsweet that really got them through that scene, I think. So again, kind of a mixed bag on the Krypton stuff, the Argo stuff. I think they should have made it, the Silver Age version where Argo survives, Superman can someday go back to his people and meet them and so forth. But that's neither here nor there, I suppose. I guess that's probably where we're going to end it, I guess. I mean, there's not too much more I can say about this movie without, going over tired ground. The film ends with Kara, she says she's going to celebrate her birthday with Ruthie, which Ruthie's probably still too young to drink. I don't know. I don't know what that was all about. Then she comes back to Earth, and again, like I said, she sort of reconciles with Clark in his apartment and brings Krypto home. Of course, Krypto survives. And Krypto, who did not die, yes, he's back and he's healthy and as mischievous as ever. And, she basically tries to tell Clark that she wants to sort of live up to being Supergirl. I don't know that they even call her. She tells Ruthie, I think, that she's Supergirl, and they have the that obligatory scene where why aren't you Superwoman? And Supergirl really doesn't even answer her. I mean, I know they had to do that too with the Melissa Benoist show. It was like, well, shouldn't I be called Supergirl? And Cat Grant is like, no, I mean, shouldn't I be called Superwoman? And Cat Grant is like, no, I don't mind being called a girl, so Supergirl is going to be called Supergirl. And so it's like you don't really need to answer those questions. I don't really understand why people feel the need like to ask that question. I mean, a name is a name, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the same thing that they do when I guess Marvel has done that a couple of times with names, and don't run away from the name. You know what I mean? Just the name is the name. Something else I should probably point out is I know a lot of people are going to be like, "Is it woke? Is it woke? Is it woke?" Because a lot of these grifters, are going to try to hang. It's a woke movie. It's a girl boss movie, and this and that. I don't know if I would say it was woke. I mean, it had a very diverse cast. I mean, if that bothers you, I mean, maybe this would be considered woke. I mean, the family that Kara doesn't save because she stopped Ruthie from killing Krem was black, and they have like an Asian doctor in the Krypton scenes, which I always say, whenever they show a person who's not white, a different ethnicity on Krypton, always takes me out of the movie because I always felt like Krypton is a planet of white dudes because that's the way it always was from as far back as I could remember up until like the 2000s. And then there's like black Kryptonians, there's white Kryptonians, there's Asian Kryptonians, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with just saying Krypton is full of white dudes. You know what I mean? It's like saying Wakanda, it should only be black dudes, right? I mean, there's no controversy there, right? Because it's a black nation. Maybe Krypton was a white planet. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. That's something that always takes me out of it when they do that. But is I feel like it doesn't feel alien to me anymore. It feels like, oh, these are the same people we see on Earth, but we're just pretending that they got powers. You know what I mean? It kind of takes me out of it. If you can make it alien to me without, making guys with 4 heads or something stupid, you know what I mean? But if you can make it feel alien, like, gee, there's no other ethnicities, it feels like it's a different race. It feels like it's a different kind of people. It feels alien, so to speak. I don't feel that when I see all the nations of the world, all the races of the world in the planet Krypton. For some reason, to me, that just doesn't work. Girl boss, I don't really know if I would say girl boss because the woke era, I think a lot of the stuff in this kind of predated the woke era. Like, for instance, Kara being on a red planet and drunk and still being able to beat up a guy that's like 5 times her size. That's kind of girl bossy. But then again, I don't think that was something that was introduced in the woke era. That you could probably find that kind of stuff in 2005 television. So anyway, I didn't find it particularly woke. But again, the ink will be spilled anyway because Millie Alcock was saying that there's no romance, and how could there be a romance in this film? This was so gloomy and stifling and depressing. There was no room for a romance. There was no room for pretty much anything that was less than traumatic. And again, just to bring this whole thing full circle, I feel like that's what the problem with the movie is. It's basically trauma on parade. I want to see, just like what I see with Superman. Superman is a wish fulfillment character. I want to see him soaring in the sky. I want to see him enjoying his powers. His powers are not a burden. That's where we went wrong with the Snyderverse, where he's dour and he's sad and he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. This is a guy that can fly. He's got invulnerability. He can pick up a building with his bare hands. He can, put laser beams out of his eyes. This is a guy that can literally do anything. And now you've got a woman that can literally do anything wearing a similar costume to him. And we're going back down that road of Snyderville, which is, oh boy, life is terrible and life is hard. And I mean, we don't really get, with the flashbacks, we really don't even get any of the backstory with her. I mean, where did she stay? Did she stay with Ma and Pa Kent? You would think they'd have some kind of a, nurturing effect on her. This is Superman's parents. I mean, Supergirl has always been sort of the little sister of Superman. I mean, not in a, literal sense, but as his cousin, it's a family. She's brought up by Ma and Pa Kent. I thought that was a fine sort of variation of the story. In the original comics, when Ma and Pa already had passed on by the time Kara came to Earth, she was adopted by the Danvers, which is another route that they took with the Melissa Benoist show. They don't do that here. We don't know that she was ever adopted by anybody. She doesn't even appear to stay in the Fortress of Solitude. You think that would be a place of comfort for her because she's, basically surrounded by what Krypton looked like, or at least what it appears that it looked like. I mean, a lot of people don't like the way Krypton Argo City looked with the sort of aesthetics of the buildings or whatever. I didn't have as much a problem with that, but I mean, you would think that that would be something that would be comforting to Kara, that she was in the Fortress of Solitude, which is sort of a replica of Krypton, at least traditionally in the live action films it has been. But again, we don't get that kind of information. We're never told exactly, her decline into drinking and partying and all that doesn't feel earned. It feels like we slapped Guardians of the Galaxy, punk rock outcast, which is basically gun stock and trade, on Supergirl. And then when she comes out of that phase and becomes the Supergirl we all know and love, that doesn't feel earned either, because we really didn't have the emotional attachment in the first place. Now, maybe they could have done better had they did a, A to Z of her origin instead of placing it in the picture at different points. I don't really know if that would have helped, honestly, because, like I said, there really isn't any through line there other than some flashbacks. I mean, we're not really building up to anything with those flashbacks. And we get to see the origin of Crypto, which is cute. Which, again, I realize that Crypto's supposed to be Superman's dog. They didn't, that's a change that I'm. You got to pick your battles. I mean, they're gonna make her Crypto her dog. All right. But again, I just feel like there was a way to do this kind of story. This wasn't it. And Supergirl deserved better than this. It feels like we're going backwards again. We're doing the mopey retro Snyder type crap. We're trying to make a downer. And these kind of characters, particularly Superman, Supergirl, they should be high entertainment, high energy, high excitement. You want to be them. You want to be with them. You want to take an adventure with them. I didn't want to be in these places where Supergirl was. I didn't want to be with Supergirl on this journey. I wanted to get out of this journey, I did not want to have a part in this. And you don't get people having good word of mouth coming to your film if that's the impression you're left with. It's just a dark and gloomy film. And how do you have Supergirl killing the villain? I mean, just think of all the heroes you've got with codes and this and that, and you want to saddle that on Supergirl? Why? And again, it gives me concern for other characters like Wonder Woman. Are we going to go down the same path with her? This is not the path that these characters should be going through. They're supposed to be a little higher than us. They've got the higher morality than us. They've got greater responsibility, and that's why they don't take the law into their own hands. And, it's hypocritical, to say the least, that she's not going to let Ruthie do it and get her vengeance. But then again, she's going to do it herself, and then she's going to put the blood on her hands. She's going to end up having, and again, this is sort of the same thing with Hawkgirl. It's like, all right, we're not going to let Superman kill. We're going to try to, keep his hands clean, but we're going to let everybody around him kill. I mean, honestly, how is Superman going to react to this? I don't think they're ever going to mention this movie in continuity again. But how is he supposed to respond to this when he finds this out? It's like, what would this do to her? She's making this big claim to Ruthie that it's going to change her life. It's going to poison her and this and that. And that's the typical superhero morality, that you're not going to take the law into your hands. And I know it might be seen as a cliche to a lot of people, but in the Kryptonian way, The answer is the Phantom Zone. So if she was going to send him into the Phantom Zone, which I think that's what they did in the end of the Woman of Tomorrow storyline, that would have been, acceptable, just like it would have been for General Zod and Man of Steel. But they always want to, because there's a segment out there of people that are not satisfied. They don't feel that justice was done unless that there's a bloodshed. And I can understand that feeling. But then again, that's why you don't make Krem this wanton killer that basically kills a whole family. And I didn't even know that was coming. That was one of the spoilers that I didn't hear. He basically kills that whole family that took Supergirl in because they wanted their daughter back, and he ends up killing the daughter too. It's like, you don't want. That's why a lot of times people are like, why doesn't Batman kill the Joker? Well, don't make the Joker a perverted sick puppy that'll kill everything under the sun and you won't have that problem. You know what I mean? There has to be a balancing act, where you don't want the hero to kill the villain. You want the hero to seek justice, but you don't want him to seek revenge, or her in this case. And they didn't follow that balancing act. They made Krem too evil. They made him a Wolverine villain. Now, like I said, if Wolverine had given him the old shish kebab at the end of the movie, if he had fought a character like Krem, that would have been fully earned. You don't want Supergirl, who, as I've described before, is like the kid sister of superheroes, killing somebody with a sword. You know what I mean? That's just not acceptable. That's not acceptable stuff. So again, I am going to rate this one 2 out of 5. Again, it's got some things in it, some performances that are not bad. I wouldn't put this up against a, Madam Web or Fan4Stick, Catwoman. It's not that bad. If you want to check it out, I would say check it out if you're particularly a fan of David Cornsweet and you kind of want to see the progression of the Superman story as it goes on, and he's in his involvement with Kara. And if you're a fan of Lobo / Jason Momoa, you always wanted to see him play this role, because honestly, he should have been playing Lobo for a long time. Fortunately, he finally gets his chance here, and he does a good job with it. I mean, it's not a large role. It's not a part that you want to write home about, but if you're interested in seeing him do his thing, it's probably worth checking out. Again, Millie Alcock, not bad. I mean, I've said before, probably not who I would have cast. She does what she can with a role that's not very well written and not particularly well thought out, but she has a few moments that are, very, very emotional, and she pulls those scenes off very well. And again, a lot of the other characters, a lot of the other actors, Ruthie and Krem, they did fine. They did well enough. But overall, story-wise, this was not the story for Supergirl. This is not what they should have done with this character. And I hope that they can just get past this, honestly, with the character of Supergirl, because Supergirl is going to be in Man of Tomorrow. I hope that they just kind of leave this movie in the past, and just because what happens is the well has been poisoned. And if we're going to go back to her killing people and not being adverse to that, and still being with a chip on her shoulder, still being bratty, that would be a huge regression. I mean, if they're going to have made this movie her character arc where she embraces the role of Supergirl, and I don't know if she even truly embraces it by the end of the film. Hopefully they will just treat it like she has and carry on from there. I would give this, maybe if I'm feeling generous, a C-. I would give this maybe a 4.5 out of 10. 4.5 or 5. I mean, depending on how I feel at the moment right now. I mean, I've only seen it once, and I am not in a hurry to see it again, but I would probably say, yeah, C-, D, 4.5, 5 stars. It's either average or slightly below average. And it's kind of with that ranking. And that's what I would say about 2 stars. It's below average. It's got some moments that keep it from being horrible, but it's probably not going to be remembered fondly by many, if at all. All right, so now it's up to you. Now, let me know what you think in the comments below. How did you feel about Supergirl? Did you feel as I did that this was the wrong vehicle for the wrong heroine, and that we really didn't need this kind of version of Supergirl? That this didn't even feel like Supergirl for the most part of the movie? And let me know what you think in the comments below. Hopefully, Gunn can right the ship for Man of Tomorrow. I know Clayface is coming out. I'm telling you right now, I'm not seeing that. I don't like body horror, and I don't know. I mean, I really don't have any interest in a solo. I mean, I didn't have interest in many of the solo Spider-Man movies like Craven and stuff like that. So I mean, I really don't have any interest in that. So the next one we're looking forward to is probably Man of Tomorrow. Um, and hopefully, from what I've seen, it looks pretty good, the behind the scenes footage, and hopefully they can right the ship. I still am not willing to write off Gunn. I mean, I think he has the possibility of doing some great things because he's not afraid to go colorful and to go Silver Age. But this film was not any of those things. So I mean, if he plays against type like he's doing here, uh, that's a mistake. Also, it did play a little too much to his type, which makes it, kind of a paradoxical movie, because it did feel very much like a Gun movie with the, uh, punk rock and this and that. And a lot of people talking about the needle drops. I besides the girl from Ipanema, I really didn't recognize any of the music. I know they did some kind of cover version of the song "The Middle." Um, none of them really had a big impact on me for better or worse. I mean, some people were saying that the needle drops are horrible. They just felt like, nondescript to me. It didn't make an impact on me one way or the other. So, I mean, again, I think Gunn really only knows how to make one movie, but you can't really put all the blame on him in this case because it really wasn't him directing the movie. Now, you still can put the blame on him because obviously he's in charge. The buck stops with him. So obviously, either Gillespie, I think is the name of the director, was either trying to play up to his favor and try to give him what he thought he wanted, or Gunn stepped in and did try to alter the film to be more like what he wanted. I don't know. We'll have to see. Time will tell how this whole thing will play out. And so until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.